Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Linking Stories in Science. I'm Allison Satake at LSU, and thanks. It's great to see so many participants tuning in today to hear a talk with Dr. Becky Carmichael. She is the Science and Engineering Coordinator at LSU, Communication Across the Curriculum. And today she is here to share her story, My Life and Career Communicating Science. And during her webinar, she's going to be giving a presentation. And if you need to message me, you can in the Zoom group chat. We'll hold our questions for the end, and you can type in your questions in the Zoom group chat on the right-hand side. This webinar will be recorded and posted later, so you can feel free to share with folks. And just as a helpful tip, if we do have bandwidth issues, I might have to ask folks to stop their video so that we can't see your shiny smiling faces, but that might free up some bandwidth. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Becky Carmichael. Yeah, take it away, Becky.
Okay, thank you. One moment while I'm getting my things organized. All righty. So I really want to say thank you to LSU, to Allison, and to Danielle with Louisiana Sea Grant for inviting me to participate. I'm really honored to join this conversation today and share with you a little bit about my own personal science journey. First and foremost, I should tell you that my training is not in communication. I'm actually a disturbance ecologist by training, and what I've learned in terms of how to communicate and share my work has been really hands-on, both in the position I'm in now, but then also I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how it led up to this and the ways that communication has always been an integral part of my career. Toward the end of this, what I really hope to give to you is not only a little bit about an understanding about me, but then also ways in which you can start working in this moment and figure out your own path in science communication. So with that, we'll just get started. There's three big things or themes that I feel like have been important with my very crooked career path. And honestly, it's taken a lot of reflection to identify these over the years. First and foremost is having resiliency. Even right now, with everything that we're facing, we're having to be resilient in the moment so that we can still go on and persevere and do what we need to do. And I would imagine if you think about your own career, your own time in graduate school and beyond, you had to have these moments where you've had a really hard challenge and maybe you didn't succeed so well, maybe you even failed, but how did you get up? And in that failure, what did you learn? I think resiliency is something very important that we all need to be recognizing within ourselves. And if you're even having trouble with that, look around you and figure out who are your coaches that can help you find how you've been resilient and then how you can apply that to the next step. The other theme for me has been opportunity. I would honestly say that I've been really fortunate to have opportunities that have been put in my path. And some of those opportunities I didn't realize I was going to take. Some of those opportunities weren't really opportunities, they were just things I had to do. But looking back now, I can see how those have helped me gain certain skill sets that then I've been able to, for the third theme, connect to other opportunities to really kind of create the career I have now. So we're going to talk about those themes as we go through my story. I personally like this particular photo of me. This is about a year old, and it really to me resonates the things that I enjoyed most as a kid. I liked being outside, I liked exploring, and I really had a fascination with tree stumps. So I grew up in a small farm in southern Louisiana, let's erase that. I grew up in southern Indiana. And on our farm, we had hogs and we had grain. We also had cats and dogs. So I spent a lot of time outside playing with those animals, assisting with kind of their care. But I also really enjoyed digging into the dirt and finding things and looking around tree stumps and finding things. And I have a very vivid memory of sorting through earthworms that my grandfather was going to use for fishing and measuring them and sorting them by their size and their length. So whether I realized it or not, I was on my path for a very kind of scientific, ecological type of career. But also in that moment, because we had all of these animals, we had a local veterinarian who would make house calls, and I would watch him and would help him. And it was a really great opportunity for me to learn from the veterinarian ways to identify what animals were healthy and thriving, and maybe what animals had signs of some disease, and then what were the steps we needed to take to make sure that they could be healthy again. This interaction with both him, with my family, really had me convinced that I was going to be a veterinarian. And so I applied to one undergraduate school, Purdue University, because in my naive mind, I was going to go there and be admitted into vet school. So I applied, I got in, I took all of those right classes to get a biological science degree while I was there. I was part of the different clubs, so like their pre-vet club. I was working in an undergraduate research lab where they were studying fetal alcohol syndrome. And I had set up time to volunteer with one of the local vets who had an all-cats clinic. Now, this is the first moment, or fork in my road, if you will, where things didn't go the way I thought they were going to go. So I arrived at this clinic. I was all ready to help all these pets and these owners and learn what I could with this hands-on opportunity. And we prepared to go and take a blood sample from this beautiful gray cat. And I'm sitting there listening, and the next thing I know, I was on the floor because I had passed out. Regrouped, got back, came back the next time, and I was going to assist with a spay. And once again, I passed out. So not only being really embarrassed and humiliated and really mad at myself, the vet said to me, he says, Becky, he goes, you're really good with details and you've got drive here, but he goes, this might not be the right career for you. And he goes, I hate to say this to you, but he goes, you might need to do some self-evaluation. So you can imagine I had set myself up to go into this path. This is where I knew I was going to go. But there was something that was stopping me. Now, I went into a friend's lab where they were doing their undergraduate research. I knew their PI, so I was talking to her, and in the conversation, she said, well, you know, hope's not lost. She says, how do you feel about plants? And I said, I have no idea about plants. I've never taken a botany class. I said, the things that I know about plants are what I grew up, you know, around me on the farm. And I said, you know, I could pick out, you know, what a daisy was versus a rose. And she says, well, how are you with details? Well, I'm pretty good at that. She's like, well, I have a project. So that particular moment, this opportunity that just happened in this moment for me, that was the crisis, ended up being a really spectacular thing, because with the mentorship of Dr. Jody Banks, I worked with her to develop a virtual herbarium that would be used in her courses when she was teaching undergraduate botany classes at Purdue. And now, mind you, this is in 98, if you will. And so here I was having to teach myself how to key out plants. I was having to learn about the ecosystems. I had to train myself on how then to find those parts and dissect them under this pretty powerful microscope. And in some instances, do short videos that were narrated. The best part of this was I loved it. This was amazing. I'm a visual person anyway, so here I was able to take pictures. I was able to think about the learner, and I was able to think about what was helping me learn. And so from this, we created this virtual herbarium. I was an undergraduate teaching assistant with her, helping out in the field, talking and helping other students learn how to press plants, talking them through troubleshooting things that I had had sticky points with. And it was really eye-opening. And so from here, this propelled me to do some pretty cool stuff. So my next step was I first volunteered and then became an employee with the National Park Service. I started as in a volunteer position at Shenandoah National Park, which is located in Virginia. And in this particular position, I was part of the Interpretation and Education Rangers. So here I was designing and developing guided hikes and programming for everyone from really young, let's say 4 years old up to 80 years old. And so I was responsible for really knowing the history of the park, the natural world, how to explain different processes, and then also having to field questions. It was challenging, but it gave me perspective and it always kept me on my toes. It was also a point where I could brainstorm with others on better ways, more effective uses of getting ideas across to someone, like what were adaptations of the plant and why that was important for them to really get on the big picture. From Shenandoah, my volunteer position, I was hired to work in Joshua Tree National Park, and I was a biological science technician in charge of a pretty large crew removing 15 feet Joshua trees and lower so that they could make way to put in, expand their roads and some of their parking lots. I had to manage a pretty big crew. I was driving large equipment, so forklifts, backhoes, so that farm experience came in handy. And I was also able to, again, be communicating with the public who inevitably would stop by and say, "Why are you destroying our park?" I was able to talk to them. I then went back to Shenandoah and was doing fuel load mapping. And that's also to where it really hit me that not only do I really like this research, I like to work and understand the role fire plays in an ecosystem, as well as those invasive species that kept popping up in different locations. And so while I did take a short break in between my Park Service time and graduate school, I finally landed here at Louisiana State University under the guidance of Dr. Bill Platt. And I was studying how fire in the longleaf pine savanna influences Japanese climbing fern, an invasive. For this position, I was also a teaching assistant. So I was doing multiple courses, finally landing in their conservation biology class, which I taught for multiple semesters. And doing my research, taking it to conferences, presenting it, learning how appropriate ways to present my research. I was doing outreach because my particular field site was located within a Girl Scout camp. So in order to give back, I was putting on programming for them. And what I was realizing is even though I thought that the research was amazing and exciting, what really gave me a lot of joy was the teaching part. And I'll be honest with you, that's pretty scary as a graduate student. And I mean, I would even venture to say it's scary in general because we're at an R1 university where research is king. How do you balance this other component that sometimes is not always as supported? So I really had to come to terms and do, again, some self-reflecting with myself. What's really going to make me happy? Do I want to go down the path and try for tenure? Or do I want to go with this other side? And this, again, is the second big fork for me. As a graduate student, I was also given other opportunities that kind of helped me with this decision. I did training to be a Wikipedia ambassador, campus ambassador. So I was teaching students in both my class and others on how to improve content for others who are interested in science. I was still TAing, and one of my bosses, Rebecca Burdett, is the director of communication across the curriculum. She came into my classroom to do a workshop, and she asked me, she goes, "You know, what are you doing after this? And I said, not really sure right now. And she says, I think I have a job for you. Would you be interested in being a science coordinator and working with faculty and students on how they communicate science? And you know, I didn't have to think very long. I knew my answer was yes. I was really excited to do that. And so in 2012, I gave birth to my son. I graduated with my PhD, and I began working at CXC. And honestly, this has been a really good fit for me. In this position, I have a lot of support. I have flexibility. I have the opportunity to brainstorm with many people across campus and what they're trying to achieve. And one of my favorite things is I get to help others understand their path and communicate what they're most excited about. Currently, I support over 200 CI course sections among the College of Science, the College of Coast and Environment, and even some in the College of Ag, with right now about 4,400 students that I within those classes. I get to teach. I'm an instructor in the Ogden Honors College as well as in the College of Science, and have a role in developing one of the College of Science's courses, which is incredibly exciting to me because I'm helping ensure that students are going to learn the material that we all deem is really crucial and important. I'm showing you a picture right now of some of my students I've mentored in the CXC Distinguished Communicator Medalist Program. And these students are those that take this extra step to showcase their skill set. This has been one of my favorite moments that we do have on campus, is when we can honor these students. I've been able to explore some of my own interests. So I'm the host and producer of LSU Experimental Podcast. So here's another opportunity for me to go out and talk with other people about what their interests are, practice my own communication skills, and then work with students that are also interested in understanding podcasting. I get to coach other speakers that are interested in speaking on big stages, such as TEDx LSU or even Big TED. And then what I've been very pleasantly surprised by is I'm also able to do research. Now, my research is no longer setting things on fire and counting small plants, but I'm getting to research and understand how people interact with science communication, as well as looking at faculty efficacy and, you know, how they feel and how they feel prepared to teach science communication in their courses. So from my science stories, these are the things that I think about that are really important. And I feel like these are big reminders for all of us. Number one is you have to be prepared for disruption, and it's going to happen. And while you may fail at that moment, remember that that disruption is opening up other opportunities, and it's up to you how you take it. It's also up to you on how you learn from those hiccups in the road, because there's always something to be learned, even in failure. The other thing to look at, and I would encourage everyone to do this, is what skills have you gathered along the way? You may not think that those skills relate to each other, because who would have guessed time on the farm would have been such an integral and important point for me to be able to troubleshoot now, as well as to be able to operate equipment and have a sense for what that was. But those are skills, right? And we can all kind of identify what those key pieces are. And again, connecting those experiences and abilities. I tell many of my distinguished communicators, some things are going to be really heavy black lines that connect from point A to point B. And it's very clear. So for instance, my students that are going into the medical field, obviously shadowing doctors directly relates to the career that you want to have. But what if you're doing aerial silks? How does that relate? How do you make that relate? Those are those interesting dashed lines, or those gray areas that you can think about. What is that skill set that you're gaining that will help you as a doctor and in that particular field? I also think that it's important to think about what skills you still have to gain. And personally, this is something that's constantly in my head. You know, I might not be good at doing Photoshop. I might not have the background of a training and taking formal classes in communication. So there's some things that I do have that are gaps, but I do know who I need to talk to if I have a question. I do know how to do the research. And you know what? I can't discredit my hands-on time. That's something that's also important. And I'm sure that you all have something like that you can think through. And last is looking for opportunities. What opportunities do you have now that can help you fill in those gaps, make those connections, and when you have these disruptions, help you rebound quickly? So, if you're all still with me, what I really wanted to move now into is why you, as the person listening to me today, should be telling your story or stories. And I particularly put research in here because my understanding is I have audiences that are across the STEM fields. So while I tend to use science since that's my background, do know that that word can be swapped out. I think that there's a lot of reward for sharing your science. Plus, we have an obligation as researchers to share our work and our discoveries. I'm going to take you into our Scientist You Selfie research project, because this to me really exemplifies why sharing research is important. You're giving someone a peek into what it's like to be a researcher. A lot of times we've had this stereotype where it was somebody that looked like Einstein, who was crazy and frazzled having things blow up in the lab. But you know that's not true. That's not what all we do. Some of us are in the field. Some of us are putting different caps on and testing out equipment to see if they work. By putting your face, putting yourself in this picture like we've done, this gives somebody an idea of the diversity that might be present, that showcase different aspects of a day. What is it like to on your daily basis to do this study, to ask these questions? How do you form communities around yourself? So by sharing your science or sharing your research, you can be doing this. You can be exposing and opening up pulling this curtain, I guess I would say, away from something that might be solitary or secluded, and allowing a broader audience in to see what's involved, and maybe even inspiring them, piquing their interest to ask you questions. The other part of this is even bigger. So by sharing your work and practicing how you share and communicate your science and your research, what you're doing is you're making it more accessible to public, but also peers, potential collaborators, and networking. And by doing so, it's going to help break down those barriers that keep people, that cause distrust. They're going to get more of a sense for what we do, as well as then kind of help dispel some, like I said, this distrust and some of the fake news that we have. You're making yourself accessible, you're showing that you're a human, and you're open to answer questions and to have a conversation. Likewise, you're dismantling those stereotypes that we all have to be crazy and secluded. Putting your warm face in there, showing your work, showing what is possible among all genders and diversities is really crucial. And then also, one of the takeaways that we found is sometimes we as researchers think that if we're sharing our research in spaces aside from conference posters and publications, that we're not going to seem very competent or intelligent. But it's actually not true. You're still retaining your competency and your intelligence and your value in this field. You're just finding another audience in which to engage with. There's some other very direct benefits that you can receive by communicating your research. Number one is you're establishing your own credibility and expertise in the field. So this is something that's going to happen when you publish in a peer-reviewed publication, or when you go to a conference and you present. But you can also think of other ways in which you can demonstrate your expertise. And that can be something like an outreach event. So we have oh, I'm sorry, I just lost it. Ocean Commotion. Ocean Commotion events is one example where you can be showcasing your work and interacting with others, demonstrating that expertise. You also have the opportunity when you're sharing your science and research to connect and network with others. Perhaps you've been on Twitter and you've seen certain hashtags, or you know a particular researcher in their lab, which is involved in something that you're excited to learn more about, or maybe even you do something similar. By engaging in that platform and communicating your space there, asking them questions, asking questions, or answering questions, you're starting to build a community around yourself who may even become collaborators in future work. The individuals that collaborated with us for Scientists Do Selfie, Dr. Paige Jarreau was here working with me, and that was her brainchild. But because she was actively putting and asking questions out on social media, we were able to collaborate with our other authors that were not even physically here. We really only got to know them through meetings like we're having now and still online. But the network we created and the collaboration we were able to do was really strong and rewarding. The other direct benefit to you is perhaps you're doing some research that you're like, this is kind of obscure and I don't know why it's important. Or it's important to me, but I don't know how to share its importance. You can put visibility on that topic by sharing it. And you can start that narrative of how it relates to something else. And even basic research, which to me, basic research is so critical because it's answering the question of why and getting into that unknown. You can also help somebody else understand and appreciate that as well. Communicating your research and your science is also practice. So we think about the research process and it's very iterative. You go through a question, you test it out, you do your methods, you get results, and then you go back. Well, the same thing can be said about how you communicate. You can be communicating with yourself, drafting some ideas, brainstorming. Then you can go and you can be sharing those with your peers, right? But this iterative process and this practice not only helps you hone the question and get toward that result that you're trying to understand, but it's also something that this is practice for you. It's helping you hone that skill and becoming better and better in the way in which you're sharing your work. And that's not going to just be something that's going to benefit you in the moment. It's going to be something that helps you long term. And I've just kind of mentioned it, but we're really going to dive into the connecting with broad audiences. So when I think about connections, I think of connections in layers. I think of connections with ourselves. So those are those reflections, this kind of understanding our abilities, understanding what we need to improve upon, and then also really kind of putting out, making sure we're demonstrating our own understanding. But connection is really integral in how we learn. So while we can talk this over with ourselves, we really need our peers to help us test out or challenge our understanding on topics. So this is why, weekly lab meetings and journal clubs and seminars are so great, because here you really have had to sit with some time and understand, what did I just read from this publication? What were the authors thinking? Do I agree with their analyses? But then you have to take your own thought and then offer it up to this other group. The same thing can be said when you're doing things about communicating science. Even in those moments, that discussion is still communication and testing this out. But what if that happened on a platform like Twitter, or in a blog, or in a website? Those are still spaces and places that you can be playing around and engaging with others to really determine whether that understanding of a topic holds water. And finally, this third layer I like to think about is that broad audience, or those external audiences. And this is really wide. One thing that I do with my students is when I talk to them about who's their audience, is I like to think about, here's my niche audience for my particular topic. But then if I expand it to ecologists, it's a little broader. If I expand it to scientists, it's bigger. Now who else do I add in here? Maybe community members and managers of land. And then the broad audience just keeps expanding to where you've got so many different people in so many different layers. Each one of those groups is an opportunity for you to figure out, how could you share the importance of what you're studying and the questions that you're asking to them. What analogies might you need to use? What definitions do you need to include? Where is your jargon that you need to work to reduce? And where are those people living? So when I say living, it's not necessarily physically where they're standing and breathing air, but what platforms can you engage them with? And so if you think about these connections and these layers, you might consider which one really gets you excited and then consider where you want to try to connect. So this leads us to the who. And this is honestly my favorite part. So I did see some of you in the participants list who have let me present to you before, and you should know that I always end up bringing up a version of the rhetorical triangle. And that's because I think it's a really important piece of us for us to all remember. And it also helps us dissect the important critical parts of a message. So as I said, you can establish your own expertise as the writer, as the communicator by practicing. But also, as you start to hone the message that you want to share, then you start to have to think about what's your purpose. Why are you sharing this information? Is it to relay the impacts of a particular advancement? Is it to showcase how a system works? Is it for education purposes? Is it to just demonstrate kind of a new discovery? By identifying your purpose, it gives you a sense for what kind of analogies, definitions, visual mediums you're going to need in order to really effectively showcase what that message is and those points you're trying to make. The other part of the rhetorical triangle is really thinking about who is your audience? What are their needs? Why are they coming to you? Why might they come to the location you are in order to learn more? And so by understanding what they need, that also helps you figure out what to include, what to exclude, maybe even what to have in the back pocket. And I find that this is something important for us to all have in mind as we move into then where we're going to share our research. And so for the next couple of slides, I'm giving you some specific locations or platforms to consider. So social media has been something that has been really interesting and a crucial point for me as I'm in my career. It's been a way to engage with broad audiences as well as those that are experts in the field. I've also found it's really exciting because there are a lot of inventive ways in which you can share your work on social media. And so here's two examples from Twitter. I'm showing you one on the left, which is prescribed burning, and using a hashtag to figure out who's in this network, who's communicating, who are those experts in the field. This is also really nice if you're thinking about different labs for postdocs or another portion of your graduate career. Who might be doing something that I would be interested in, and whose lab might I want to join? On the other side is a way to use Twitter in order to engage a broader audience. So Raven, the science maven, if you've not watched her social distancing little video, I recommend it. It's quite inventive. But here she's used multiple different hashtags and then converted an important science message that we have going right now in this pandemic into something that's going to stick in someone's head. So now she's thinking about her broader audience and how she's going to connect with them. The other way that you can use social media is how we work with Instagram. Now, I said I was a pretty visual person, so I tend to go to Instagram more so than Twitter. Twitter is very ephemeral, so you have a conversation that might last about 15 minutes. And so if you're wanting to have that conversation, you need to keep coming back. You also want to make sure that you're not getting the water hose effect. So really thinking about hashtags, terms, phrases, or even people that you want to follow and want to engage with, and then focusing on that. Otherwise, you're just getting everything, and that can feel overwhelming. Instagram's kind of the same, but also you can start looking about who's highlighting interesting pictures and interesting stories. I bring this one up because here's this picture, and you see this gentleman in his tie-dye, and he has this little wallaby in a towel, right? And your initial thought might be, or at least for me, was, oh, this is such a sweet photo. But then there's a power in the caption. So he has used this image to hook me and bring my attention to him. But then as I read, I realize that he's got something very serious to share. So you can think about, you know, in this case, it's like we need to check and make sure when we see a wallaby that's been hit on the road, that a lot of times there might not just be one, that there might also be a baby. And how can we go and save these different animals and be aware? By doing this and using this particular platform, you could potentially reach a broader audience, and you can help bring awareness to certain situations. We've seen this with the Australian fires. We've seen this with other kinds of issues in terms of even like what we're seeing here. You can also use it as a teaching moment, and it doesn't always have to be a photo that you take. Sometimes a drawing or a cartoon can be really effective for conveying your message. Likewise, sometimes these cartoons can be really effective for asking questions of others and engaging in a back and forth conversation in terms of, was this a clear representation of what I am trying to convey? Do I need to add a different color? Do I need to add more lines or more details? Think about how you can use those platforms to both benefit yourself and your research, but then also how you can share. And the other thing I like to bring up is the use of different platforms to help improve yourself. So for me, while I was really excited to engage in podcasting, selfishly, I was also really wanting to help improve my own conversation ability, discussion techniques, and develop a technique for guiding story from someone else I'm working with. And because I hadn't had that communication training, this was my approach to get some hands-on for myself, while also getting to connect with some of the amazing faculty, students, and alumni that have come out of LSU. And there is a lot right now on how you do podcasting. There's a lot of different resources that you can look into. But it's a really kind of a fun medium, and it's been some way in which, for me personally, I can improve. And now, so one of the things that from that, all of this pieces is once you're thinking about what kind of message you have, what is it about your research that really excites you, you want to start thinking about what kind of stories you might be able to tell. Again, I recommend reflecting. Thinking about maybe even small stories. Is there something that you do all day, every day that might seem repetitive to you, such as pipetting, but it also kind of gives you the opportunity to talk about sterile techniques, the amount of pipettes and samples that you have to go through. Is it an opportunity to talk about the system that you're examining? Think about what brings you joy. What really makes you happy and what makes you excited? Because once you have that, that's something that you can convey to someone else. And believe me, enthusiasm and excitement are contagious. And it can come through in your voice, it can come through in visuals, it can come through in conversation, it can come through in everything. So really honing in on that. The other thing is, what are your burning questions right now? Are you struggling with kind of where to go with your research? Would you like to have some insight? Has somebody else been testing this particular question? Sharing those burning questions, putting those things out, that's another way that you can make connections and collaborate potentially with others, or even just have a really nice conversation. And that can happen in different mediums. And then I've also included for you the what, so what, and now what. So essentially this is, what are you doing? So why should someone care? Why is this important? And because this is important and this is why someone cares, now what are we going to do with that? The what, so what, now what is a really good exercise to implement from journal club onto even publications. I'm going to write this particular piece up for +1. Why should someone care? And because I've found these results, now what's the next step? Identify why and for whom you're sharing your work. It's always critical that you're thinking about that end game and who's going to be on the receiving end. What is the value in that? That shapes the place that you put your information. It shapes the language that you use, the visuals you include, and even what platform you use. And also, how can this be a progression? So I might be sharing some small pieces on Instagram, but how does that lead up to the big picture? Is it a way that I can show a long-term study or moments in, say, plant growth or, you know, the response of fire? How can I show someone an even bigger story? And how can that lead up to something bigger for you? Things that you can do to become a better communicator, I've mentioned this multiple times, is take those opportunities. Now, I understand you're in grad school. I obviously understand that that's a very stressful time and it ebbs and flows. You've got a job to do while you're here and you've got your research. So you can't take every single opportunity that falls in your plate. Be selective, but think about the opportunities that are going to benefit you in the long run. Identify those skills that you want to develop and ones you need, and use that as a way to select the opportunities, as well as what opportunities really excite you. Do not shy away from participating in conferences, invited talks. Take those as, again, opportunities for yourself to work on how you share your research, and maybe even the ways in which you present it. After you present, reflect on that event. Try to do it as soon as you can after. Take some notes on how you want to improve, and then apply that to the next event or the next post or the next tweet. Connect with your science community. Connect with those that are within your department, on the same campus, but also connect with people online. The more that you can make yourself known, the more you're establishing your expertise and your overall excitement and interest in a program, you'll soon find that people start to contact you for advice or ideas, or even just, they want to collaborate with you. So utilize that network, because you never know when someone else's expertise is going to come in handy and help you leverage what you're wanting to try to achieve. Create content. And at this point, you can practice creating a lot of different content. I encourage you even to sketch. Doodling is something that's really important. It helps kind of lay out ideas. It's a way to storyboard your ideas. Do that. Try to take some pictures of yourself, either in the lab or out in the field or in front of a whiteboard, and then sit back and look at that. How could you share that with someone else, and what would be there to gain? And lastly, practice. Practice this all along the way. As researchers, our job is not only to find those answers and to investigate and to brainstorm, but it's also to share that. And if we don't share it, it lives and dies with us. And then somebody else is going to be in the same situation, stuck. So the more you can share, the more it's going to help you improve and get better at sharing, and the more you're going to become more comfortable with it. And who knows, maybe it's going to help you answer those questions. I've given you a couple of different resources that I have found very helpful. The first article was something that was really integral for me in terms of understanding kind of social media in the sciences, but I'm also sharing with you a collaboration that we did with the SciComm challenge, and it was an Instagram class. The link I have up here now is something that you can use. It's a self-guided class if you're really interested in saying, I would like to try Instagram. And then the other link I've provided is the Twitter tutorial. So Dr. Paige Jarreau had put this together for us while she was at CXC, and it kind of walks you through putting together an account. How do you connect with others? But there's other videos that are available on both the LSU CXC and the CXC Science YouTube accounts that may have interest. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Allison for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Becky. We really appreciate your talk. And now we want to open it up to all of you participants to send through the Zoom group chat any of your burning questions that you might have for Dr. Carmichael. And just to start, Becky, we were wondering, what advice do you give students and researchers who study things that are too small or abstract to see, that aren't necessarily tangible or easy to comprehend, on how to effectively tell these types of science stories?
I like this question. So I think that, I'll be honest, my immediate part of myself goes to brainstorming, how are we going to solve this problem? And then it goes to visual. I do think that some of these things that are super small, if you can even sketch something out, if you can relate it to, and this even goes for something that's really, really big, right? If you can relate it to something that's tangible. So for instance, my head has immediately gone to plate tectonics and earth crust. And I think about a peach, and I think about the peach skin, the flesh, and the stone part of the seed, right? And so those are ways in which you can give an analogy for something and you can talk through it. Also, some things that are really small is to talk about the function and the importance of that small thing, and then to say kind of why it matters to you. So right now I'm seeing a lot of really great communication on the coronavirus, COVID-19. The way it is structured, the sucker-like structure on the outer part of the virus and how that helps stick to the skin. So immediately I'm thinking about, an octopus tentacle and those suckers, or I'm thinking about, other types of suckers, and how if we think about that and it's sticking to our skin, we can then start thinking about how small these are, and we can get smaller and smaller, and then you can start thinking about and sharing with someone, well, if you can't see them but they're still stuck to your skin, how do you remove them? Those are just a couple of different ways I would think about.
Great. You mentioned how, as grad students, being really busy, don't take every single opportunity, but pick and choose. What were, say, 2 examples that you took in your school when you were a grad student, a PhD student, that were just integral to where you are now?
Um, well, one was the Wikipedia ambassador training. That was something that was offered through CXC, and it's kind of funny. Bill had something else come up. He had RSVP'd, and he said, something's come up, I can't make it, but I would really like for you to go. And I was like, that sounds kind of cool. Let's go see what happens. And because I joined that group, I got that training. Not only was I able to teach our students, but in fact, I traveled to San Juan, Puerto Rico, and helped present at a conference jointly with Wiki Education. I've had publications, conference proposals, and I have a book chapter out of that interaction with both my students as well as that training. And if I hadn't said yes to that, there's a whole section of my life that would be missing. Also, too, I have a better understanding of resources and information literacy that maybe I'm sure I would have had, but now I have a deeper appreciation for. And you asked for a second one. In grad school, oh goodness, I guess I think some of it has to do with really the teaching. So taking those opportunities and going out into the field. We did a lot of Saturday events, so Bluebonnet Swamp, and going out and we're doing invasive species removal, as well as going to Big Branch and doing marsh grass restoration. If I hadn't said yes and given several Saturdays, those were really kind of hands-on, in the moment opportunities that I can be working with my students as well as the managers of those properties, so that they had a better appreciation for big picture.
Okay, thanks. We have a question from Vitek. He wants to know, given that graduate students are already strapped for time and that there are various outlet platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, etc., which platform would you recommend if you had to prioritize? And second is, are personal websites still relevant?
I'm going to answer the second part first. Yes, I think personal websites are still relevant. I think that those are a great space that you can customize based on both your interest and your particular field. I think that those are a spectacular thing too, that you can evolve over time and may one day end up being your own personal, your own lab website that others are adding to it. I see a lot of value in personal websites. Now, in terms of prioritizing, and this is something that I'm having to do now, I've had to do forever. I find that my inclination is to go to Instagram and either do a story or do a post there because it has more longevity. And for me, I try to do it once a week, but I also take breaks because sometimes other things are happening and I don't. But I try to, that's at least where I find I get the more bang for my time. So I think about, if there an image or is there something that happens in the moment that I can put. I also try to bank content. So sometimes if I've had something really cool happen, I might take multiple different pictures or different angles or different aspects. And then I have a Google Doc and I write captions out. I put those hashtags in appropriately, and then I'll just cue those in, and I'll add those in over time. So it's not just a dump all at once. So Instagram is my preference. Twitter is something if I have a question or if I'm trying to help promote somebody else's work or interest, I will go there. But again, while I check Twitter right now pretty frequently, I don't always post every day. So it really is up to your schedule. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. We have a question from Sunday. This talk has been really awesome. Many thanks.
Thank you.
And what wisdom would you share concerning anonymity that is staying anonymous while communicating thoughts on issues of science or public interest?
That's a good one. Honestly, my preference is to share with somebody who I am. And now there are certain things that I try not to share in certain spaces. I tend to stay away from political things on Instagram and Twitter, just because that can go south and can just get ugly. And I want those to be fun things, and I want those places to be joy, right? And I also try to keep my Instagram focused on science, scientific research, communication, and maybe a little bit of my personal life. So sometimes you're going to see my kid pop up, and it's just because it's something funny and I think it's relatable. But in terms of anonymity, I guess for me, I want to know who I'm talking to. But yeah, that one's a hard one. I'm not sure how else to answer that one.
No problem. Any last minute questions for folks? I just want to, before we close out. Okay. Well, I want to thank Dr. Becky Carmichael so much for your time and energy, providing all this great information and making yourself available amidst all of this. And we want to remind everyone that this has been recorded and we'll be posting this webinar online to share. And then also, if any of you, I'll be hanging out on here for a little bit. So if anyone has any other ideas of SciComm topics or talks or presenters you'd like us to bring to you in the future, please send us a note via the chat box here. But thank you so much, Dr. Carmichael.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.